You thought I'd crumble? Watch closely. The words echoed in Madeline Carter's mind as she adjusted the emerald green silk drape of her gown, feeling the weight of every past insult and betrayal transform into a quiet armor. The grand ballroom of the Lexington Hotel glittered with 1,000 crystal chandeliers, each one reflecting the soft golden light that danced across polished marble floors. The scent of sandalwood and fresh linen mingled with the subtle hum of conversations, a symphony of opulence and expectation. Guests in tailored tuxedos and flowing gowns moved gracefully, the low murmur of clinking glasses weaving a tapestry of elegance and power. Madeline's eyes scanned the room, catching glimpses of familiar faces, some curious, some indifferent, all unknowingly witnessing the calm before a storm. Across the room, Ethan Blackwell's dark tailored suit contrasted sharply with the white table linens and sparkling stemware, his posture rigid, a practiced smile concealing the tension that lingered like a shadow. He moved through the crowd with a predatory grace, eyes fixed on Madeline as if measuring the distance she had traveled and plotting to shrink her world back to the size he once controlled. Every step he took was deliberate, echoing against the soft whispers of silk and the muted clatter of silverware. Madeline inhaled slowly, the cool air scented with vanilla and old money filling her lungs, grounding her in the moment. She remembered the late nights spent rebuilding her life, the small victories and quiet achievements that no one had seen, the moments of doubt transformed into determination. Her hand brushed against the smooth surface of the crystal glass at her place, a tactile reminder of the strength she now carried. Ethan's gaze finally met hers, a flash of recognition and surprise breaking through his calculated demeanor. The ballroom seemed to pause, the music dipping momentarily as if the space itself held its breath. Madeline felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, not fear, but the exhilarating awareness of control regained, the power of a story rewritten with dignity. She allowed a subtle smile to play on her lips, a signal to herself and the world that she was no longer the woman defined by his judgments. Each step she took toward the center of the room was measured, graceful, a silent proclamation of presence, an assertion of the life she had claimed as her own. Conversations continued around her. Glasses clinked, laughter rose and fell, yet the space between her and Ethan crackled with unspoken history and the suspense of what was about to unfold. Every glance, every slight gesture became a note in a tense symphony, the audience unaware that they were witnessing the opening movement of a story defined not by past grievances, but by present mastery and poised anticipation, a prelude to the moment when patience, poise, and quiet power would command the attention and shift the narrative in her favor. Madeline Carter moved through the ballroom with deliberate grace, each step a quiet declaration of control and confidence, her senses acutely attuned to the hum of conversations and the subtle shifts in attention that followed her presence. She reflected on the past 5 years, the countless hours spent transforming a life once defined by loss into one of autonomy and respect. The apartment she had painstakingly decorated, the art pieces she had curated, the gallery events she had hosted. All of these achievements formed a tapestry of resilience that no whispered insult or judgment could unravel. Her eyes briefly met those of Ethan Blackwell, who now stood frozen in the distance, a mixture of incredulity and frustration playing across his features. Madeline allowed herself a faint, controlled smile, savoring the moment without the need for confrontation, knowing that her presence alone was enough to shift the balance. The soft glow of the chandeliers reflected on her gown, and she could feel the smooth fabric beneath her fingertips, a reminder of the meticulous attention she had invested in presenting herself not for anyone else, but for herself. The music, a delicate string quartet, rose and fell, each note punctuating the elegance of the night and underscoring the subtle drama unfolding in silence. Madeline's thoughts drifted to the small victories that had accumulated over the years, the contracts won, the mentorships forged, the reputation quietly earned. She had become a presence in her own right, a force measured not in volume, but in the assurance with which she navigated every interaction. Ethan's approach had been anticipated, his steps predictable, yet watching him falter brought an unspoken satisfaction that needed no words. The room seemed to bend around her composure, the whispers of the guests a soft, indistinct backdrop to the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. She greeted familiar colleagues with a nod, her expressions poised, reflecting warmth without dependence, acknowledgment without compromise. Every glance at her reflected not just beauty or refinement, but the accumulated strength of experience, the quiet insistence that she would no longer be defined by the shadows of past betrayal. As she moved closer to the center of the room, her perspective sharpened, noting subtle shifts in seating, the direction of gazes, the slight stiffening of posture among those who had once underestimated her. This awareness was not mere observation. It was the application of a hard-earned confidence, a subtle orchestration of presence that altered the flow of energy around her. The gentle brush of air as she passed tables, the faint scent of her perfume mingling with the ambient aroma of fine cuisine, and the muted glint of glassware against candlelight all contributed to a tableau that was both serene and charged, a visual metaphor for her journey from displacement to empowerment. In this precise, deliberate movement, Madeline Carter embodied the principle that power need not shout to be recognized, that resilience could command attention without drama, and that sometimes the most potent statement was simply the quiet assertion of existence, a poised step forward in a world that had once sought to diminish her. She was present, she was unshakable, and with every measured gesture, she reminded everyone observing, especially Ethan, that she was no longer the person to be underestimated or confined to the margins of their narrative. As Madeline Carter reached the center of the ballroom, the ambient hum of conversation seemed to fall away, replaced by the subtle, almost imperceptible tension that threaded through the gathered guests. Every eye drawn to her presence reflected not curiosity alone, but the silent recognition of authority, poise, and the elegance earned through years of quiet perseverance. Ethan Blackwell remained a few steps behind, his confident composure beginning to falter under the weight of her calm assurance. The soft glow of the chandeliers highlighted the precise cut of her gown, the way it caught the golden light in gentle ripples, symbolizing both refinement and resilience. Each movement she made was measured, a choreography of deliberate grace that broadcasted strength without a word spoken. Across the room, a figure stepped forward, subtle yet commanding, hinting at an unseen ally whose influence amplified her presence without overt display, a strategic shadow in the background that shifted the energy around them. The murmurs among the attendees rose and fell like a tide, sensing the shift in balance, the unspoken acknowledgment that the woman they once dismissed had returned fully realized, formidable in her quiet power. Madeline's mind wandered briefly to the countless mornings spent planning, organizing, and building, the small but decisive choices that had led her to this moment, where competence and confidence radiated effortlessly, eclipsing past vulnerabilities. The soft chime of a distant clock punctuated the moment, a subtle reminder of time past and lessons learned, each second reinforcing the unassailable position she now occupied. Ethan's attempted approach slowed, hesitation threading his steps as he processed the transformation before him, the realization settling that the person he had underestimated was no longer defined by his expectations or by the shadows of former mistakes. The room's energy shifted perceptibly with her gaze, the understated elegance and quiet dominance forming an unbroken circle of influence that invited respect, admiration, and a touch of awe. She moved past familiar faces, acknowledging them with nods and small smiles, gestures that conveyed warmth without dependency, engagement without compromise, signaling mastery of both the social sphere and her personal narrative. Every glimmer of light on the crystal glassware, every reflection in the polished marble floor, seemed to echo her ascent from obscurity to command, turning ordinary observation into a testament of presence. The low murmur of conversation resumed, yet it was infused with a subtle undercurrent of recognition, a tacit understanding that this was no ordinary evening, that the woman moving through their midst was not the person they had assumed, but a careful, poised embodiment of resilience and reclaimed dignity. As the orchestration of glances, gestures, and space converged, Madeline Carter maintained her unwavering pace, a living declaration that the past was a prologue, and that every measure of attention, every subtle shift in posture, confirmed her dominion over the moment and the unspoken narrative that would unfold from here, leaving Ethan and all observers suspended in anticipation of the revelation still to come. The soft clink of glassware and the muted laughter of guests filled the Lexington Hotel ballroom. Yet Madeline Carter moved as if the room had contracted to the space around her, every gaze she passed acknowledging her presence without question. The air carried a mixture of delicate fragrances, from fresh roses in the centerpieces to the faint vanilla undertone of her perfume, a scent that seemed to mark her territory subtly, yet unmistakably. Ethan Blackwell remained in her peripheral vision, attempting to project the composure of control, but each calculated step he took toward her revealed the cracks in his confidence, the realization that the power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. Madeline's mind briefly traced the arc of her own journey, the hours of meticulous planning, the quiet triumphs of building influence and reputation that no one had witnessed or validated, each moment a brick in the fortress of her self-possession. She allowed herself a small, deliberate nod to a passing acquaintance, a gesture of courtesy that carried with it the weight of command and assuredness, a silent communication that she moved in the world on her own terms. Across the room, the soft shimmer of her gown reflected the chandelier light in gentle, deliberate waves, signaling sophistication, success, and the kind of presence that demanded attention without force. Guests adjusted their positions subtly as she passed, drawn into the orbit of her poise, their whispers carrying both admiration and an unspoken acknowledgment of her transformation. Ethan's steps slowed, his posture tightening as he unconsciously measured the distance between them, the once familiar arena of social manipulation now seeming foreign and unsteady beneath his feet. Every detail in the room, the polished marble, the delicate arrangements of crystal and flowers, the low, warm glow of candlelight, formed a backdrop to Madeline's assertion of authority, each element reinforcing the subtle yet undeniable narrative of her reclamation. She paused briefly, allowing a controlled breath to anchor her, the gentle rhythm of air moving in and out a quiet reminder of the patience, strategy, and discipline that had brought her to this moment. The music swelled momentarily, a cello string resonating through the high ceilings, accompanying her deliberate movement, the cadence echoing the steady, unwavering pulse of confidence she now carried. She met a few glances from familiar faces, responding with a calm smile that communicated both warmth and independence, the subtle power of a woman fully aware of her worth and her position in the unfolding narrative. Ethan's gaze met hers again, a flicker of the old certainty replaced by hesitation, the realization that the person he had underestimated was now beyond his influence, her authority visible, tangible, and unassailable. As she moved toward the center of the room, the space seemed to bend around her, the weight of past grievances dissolved into a commanding presence that left every observer sensing the shift, a transformation neither announced nor boasted, yet impossible to ignore. In this measured, purposeful navigation, Madeline Carter demonstrated the culmination of years of resilience, strategy, and composure, a living testament to the quiet power of persistence and self-possession, leaving Ethan and the assembled guests suspended in anticipation, aware that the next moments would reveal the full scope of the woman who had returned to claim the narrative once denied to her. Madeline Carter paused at the edge of the grand ballroom, her gaze sweeping over the elegantly dressed guests and the delicate interplay of light across the polished marble floor. Each conversation, each subtle glance in her direction, reinforced the unspoken acknowledgment of her presence and the quiet authority she carried effortlessly. Ethan Blackwell remained near the far side of the room, his attempts to maintain composure undermined by the undeniable aura that surrounded her. The soft rustle of silk and the faint glimmer of crystal reflected on her gown created a visual cadence that seemed to draw attention without effort, commanding recognition in a space where power was measured in subtlety and perception. Madeline's thoughts traced the journey that had led her here, each decision, each act of deliberate self-restoration, reinforcing a narrative of resilience and strategic patience. She remembered the evenings spent planning meticulously, the mornings devoted to building influence, the countless small victories that cumulatively forged a presence impossible to ignore. As she navigated past familiar faces, her expressions balanced warmth with independence, acknowledging others without dependence, signaling mastery over both social dynamics and personal narrative. Ethan's gaze followed her movements. Each step he had once anticipated to intimidate, now faltering under the weight of the transformation he witnessed. Madeline felt the subtle shift in the room, a current of energy bending around her, the collective attention aligning with the quiet assertion of her confidence. Candlelight reflected softly off her gown and the polished surfaces around her, enhancing a tableau where elegance met authority, where every motion spoke of calm control and measured intent. The soft strains of a string quartet filled the space, the music rising and falling with a gentle rhythm that paralleled her composed heartbeat, each note accentuating the deliberate poise she maintained. She exchanged nods and smiles with guests, small gestures charged with the awareness of her reclaimed narrative, conveying respect. Without yielding control, presence without dependence. Observing the room through the lens of both past experience and present mastery, she noted the subtle realignment of attention, the micro-shifts in posture and glances among attendees that signaled recognition of her elevated position. Ethan's posture tightened as he unconsciously measured the distance between them, the familiar game of social dominance now revealing the contours of its obsolescence. Madeline's mind remained centered, every breath a reminder of the careful construction of the life she had curated, a testament to years of strategic patience and unwavering composure. The gentle ambient noise of conversation, the soft clatter of silverware, and the understated sparkle of crystal vases framed her movements, each element reinforcing the narrative of empowerment and quiet triumph. As she continued across the room, the space seemed to accommodate her presence, every subtle shift in attention and posture amplifying the sense that she had arrived fully, irrevocably, and that the unfolding moments would be measured not by the expectations of the past, but by the authority and dignity she now embodied, leaving Ethan and the observing guests suspended in anticipation of the revelation that was only beginning to unfold before them. The soft murmur of conversation continued around Madeline Carter as she moved with deliberate purpose, each step measured, a dance of quiet authority that commanded attention without a word. The golden glow of chandeliers reflected off her gown in gentle waves, shimmering like liquid light over the polished marble floors, and the subtle scent of fresh roses intertwined with her own understated fragrance, creating an aura that felt simultaneously intimate and commanding. Ethan Blackwell's gaze followed her with increasing unease, his attempt to maintain composure undermined by the undeniable poise radiating from her every gesture. Madeline's thoughts drifted briefly to the countless hours she had spent building this life, the careful cultivation of professional alliances, the development of a reputation grounded in competence and respect, the late nights of planning and executing decisions that had restored both her confidence and her sense of self-worth. She smiled faintly at a passing acquaintance, the smile measured, confident, conveying warmth without dependence, acknowledging the room without yielding to it. Each subtle movement, her fingertips brushing against the smooth surface of a crystal vase, the gentle swish of silk across the floor, the way she held herself upright, signaled mastery, her presence rewriting the unspoken narrative of the space. Ethan's expression shifted subtly, recognition of the transformation dawning across his features, his posture tightening as he processed the fact that the person he had once underestimated was no longer bound by his expectations. The quiet rhythm of the string quartet punctuated the room, each note echoing the steady cadence of her confidence, reinforcing the calm, yet undeniable power she projected. Conversations continued, laughter rising and falling like a gentle tide. Yet the energy around Madeline seemed to bend the room subtly toward her orbit, drawing glances, creating small shifts in posture and attention that testified to her influence. She moved with an ease born of experience, acknowledging greetings with graceful nods and soft smiles, gestures that conveyed engagement without surrender, presence without compromise. The space around her seemed to pulse with recognition, a silent testament to her careful preparation and strategic patience, a narrative of resilience that required no proclamation, only presence. Ethan's attempts at regaining control slowed as he realized the subtle authority she now wielded, her every measured step highlighting the contrast between his expected dominance and the reality before him. The light caught in her eyes as she glanced toward the center of the room, reflecting both the depth of her journey and the quiet triumph of patience, composure, and mastery over circumstances that had once threatened to define her. In this interplay of gaze, gesture, and ambient sound, Madeline Carter occupied the room fully, her presence a living statement of earned power, leaving all who observed her, especially Ethan, suspended in anticipation of the moments yet to unfold, aware that the story of reclamation and quiet triumph was only beginning to reveal its full impact. Madeline Carter paused at the grand ballroom's threshold, the soft hum of conversation and the faint clink of crystal glasses creating a rhythmic backdrop to the quiet storm she carried within. Each step she took was deliberate, measured, as if the marble floors themselves guided her presence toward the inevitable convergence of past and present. Ethan Blackwell remained in her peripheral vision, his once commanding aura tempered by the subtle, yet undeniable authority radiating from her. The gentle glow of the chandeliers reflected across her gown, capturing shades of emerald and gold, signaling both refinement and resilience, while the air carried the delicate aroma of fresh roses mingled with hints of her understated perfume. She recalled the years spent cultivating strength, each decision and action a brick in the foundation of the life she now commanded, every achievement unseen but deeply felt, shaping the woman who moved through this space with serene power. As she approached the center of the room, glances from other guests followed her, each acknowledgment unspoken yet unmistakable, a testament to the transformation that had taken place, the subtle shift in energy that announced her reclamation without declaration. Ethan's eyes tracked her movement, his composure giving way to a quiet tension, the realization dawning that the person before him was no longer defined by his expectations or the shadows of their shared history. Madeline's pulse remained steady, her breathing controlled, each inhale and exhale a quiet affirmation of mastery over both her emotions and the space around her. The ambient strains of a string quartet rose and fell in harmony with her measured pace, the music accentuating the elegance of her movement and the gravity of the moment. She exchanged soft nods and gentle smiles with familiar faces, gestures that conveyed warmth and acknowledgment without yielding her presence, a balance of grace and authority that drew attention naturally and effortlessly. The subtle shimmer of her gown, the soft rustle of silk, the faint reflection of candlelight across crystal vases all combined to create a tableau of calm power and controlled influence, a visual narrative that spoke as loudly as any spoken words could. Ethan's steps faltered as he gauged the distance between them, the space that had once been familiar now reframed by her confidence and composure, a landscape transformed by her presence alone. Every movement, every poised glance, every nuanced gesture communicated a story of resilience and strategy, the silent orchestration of her regained narrative shaping the room's perception in real time. As Madeline reached the center, the ambient light catching the depth of her eyes and the subtle contours of her expression, the room seemed to hold its breath, the collective attention drawn to the quiet yet compelling force she had become. In this moment, poised between observation and anticipation, Madeline Carter embodied the culmination of patience, foresight, and self-possession, a living testament to the power of endurance and dignity, leaving Ethan and the gathered guests suspended in a shared awareness of the narrative shift that had silently but irrevocably taken place before them. The ambient glow of the Lexington Hotel ballroom seemed to deepen, as Madeline Carter moved with unwavering precision through the crowd, each step calculated to command attention while maintaining the grace of effortless elegance. The soft murmurs of conversation shifted subtly as guests turned to observe her, the quiet authority in her posture drawing notice without the need for overt announcement. The light from the crystal chandeliers danced across her gown, reflecting shades of emerald and gold that emphasized both her poise and the intentionality behind every movement. She felt the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat in harmony with the gentle swell of the string quartet, each note underscoring the deliberate cadence of her approach. Ethan Blackwell, positioned near the edge of the room, tried to project the composure he had always relied upon. But the undeniable shift in energy surrounding Madeline left him momentarily uncertain, his every gesture betraying the tension he sought to hide. Madeline's mind wandered briefly to the quiet victories that had brought her here. The meticulous planning, the strategic alliances, the small but decisive accomplishments that collectively redefined her presence in a space that had once symbolized constraint and judgment. She offered a subtle nod to a familiar colleague, a gesture infused with warmth, poise, and the awareness of her own reclaimed narrative, signaling respect without yielding authority. The air carried the delicate mixture of fine perfume and fresh floral arrangements, a sensory backdrop that complemented her movements and reinforced the impression of control and composure she radiated effortlessly. Guests adjusted their posture and attention as she passed, whispers and glances acknowledging the transformation she embodied, the quiet dominance of a woman who had learned to wield patience, strategy, and presence as instruments of influence. Each detail, the slight catch of light on her hair, the measured sway of her gown, the soft rustle of silk against polished marble, reinforced the tableau of elegance interwoven with command, creating a subtle yet undeniable orchestration of social power. Ethan's expression shifted, the certainty he had carried now tempered by the realization that Madeline's presence alone reshaped the dynamics of the room, a visual testament to the cumulative effect of resilience and strategic mastery. The interplay of light, reflection, and ambient sound seemed to frame her movements, emphasizing the careful balance between strength and grace, autonomy and engagement, command and subtlety. Every glance and gesture became a note in the intricate symphony of influence she conducted silently, guiding perception and attention without declaration or confrontation. Madeline's gaze swept across the room, registering the alignment of focus, the subtle shifts of posture, the quiet acknowledgments of respect, each observation reinforcing the narrative of empowerment she had cultivated meticulously. As she approached the center of the ballroom, the space seemed to expand around her. Every detail, the ambient light, the arrangement of guests, the gentle cadence of conversation, enhancing the presence of a woman fully in command of her story and the attention it drew, leaving Ethan and the surrounding guests suspended in anticipation, aware that the unfolding moments would reveal the full measure of her reclaimed dignity and influence. The gentle murmur of the ballroom continued as Madeline Carter moved with deliberate precision, her gaze sweeping across the faces of guests who had once underestimated her. Each glance met with the serene confidence that had been cultivated over years of quiet perseverance. The light from the crystal chandeliers caught the subtle contours of her gown, casting reflections of emerald and gold that danced across the polished marble floors, creating an almost hypnotic cadence that seemed to draw attention naturally toward her. Ethan Blackwell stood at the edge of the room, his practiced composure faltering as the undeniable authority radiating from Madeline registered fully, the realization dawning that the dynamic between them had irrevocably shifted. The soft strains of the string quartet wove through the ambient chatter, each note harmonizing with the rhythm of her measured steps, reinforcing the presence she commanded without force or proclamation. She allowed herself a moment to observe the intricate social choreography around her, the subtle adjustments of posture among acquaintances, the quickening of glances in her direction, the whispered recognitions that acknowledged not just her beauty, but the maturity, confidence, and mastery of space she now embodied. Every breath she took was controlled, a quiet assertion of calm in a room that had previously defined her by absence and underestimation. Her eyes met those of a familiar colleague, and with a small, deliberate nod, she conveyed warmth and acknowledgment without yielding authority, signaling a balanced engagement with the social environment she now navigated with skill. Ethan's steps had slowed, each movement weighted with an unspoken calculation, the energy around Madeline unmistakably affirming her influence, her regained narrative shaping the room's attention as subtly as it did powerfully. The delicate scent of fresh roses and understated perfume mingled in. The warm air, layering the senses with cues of elegance and poise, each element reinforcing the narrative of presence and reclaimed dignity. As Madeline moved toward the center of the room, The guests instinctively shifted their attention, the alignment of gazes, gestures, and subtle movements forming a collective acknowledgment of the transformation she had undergone. The soft clatter of silverware, the muted laughter, and the gentle hum of conversation formed a backdrop that emphasized the contrast between the ordinary bustle and the extraordinary assertion of calm mastery she displayed. Each gesture, the smooth motion of her hand brushing past a crystal vase, the slight sway of her gown, the measured lift of her chin, communicated a story of endurance, strategy, and refined authority that resonated without need for explanation. Ethan's composure continued to waver as he registered the totality of her presence, the contrast between the woman he once believed he knew and the force before him, now unmistakable. Madeline Carter had transformed the room into a stage for the quiet power of her resilience. Every movement a declaration of self-possession and strategic mastery, leaving observers suspended in anticipation, acutely aware that the moments to follow would reveal the full measure of her dignity and control, the culmination of years spent rebuilding not just her life, but the very perception of her presence within the world they now shared. Madeline Carter reached the center of the ballroom, the soft glow of chandeliers reflecting in her eyes and across the polished marble floors, catching the subtle shimmer of her emerald gown as if every light in the room were following her movement. The string quartet's music rose and fell, a gentle rhythm that mirrored the steady cadence of her heartbeat, steady and unwavering despite the weight of expectation in the space. Ethan Blackwell's posture grew tense, a subtle shift betraying his awareness that the confident woman before him was not the person he had once known. She was stronger, more assured, and entirely in command of the narrative she now inhabited. Madeline's gaze scanned the assembled guests, noting the slight lean of heads, the quickened glances, the soft murmurs that hinted at recognition and curiosity, all responding to her presence with unspoken acknowledgment. She allowed herself a faint, controlled smile, one that radiated calm confidence and the quiet assertion of authority without a word, signaling mastery of the moment and the room. The ambient scent of roses and fine perfume intertwined with the warmth of the evening, creating an atmosphere that was simultaneously inviting and commanding, framing her movements with elegance and precision. Each step was deliberate, a choreography that reinforced both her poise and the subtle power she exerted, a testament to the strategic patience and careful rebuilding that had led her to this moment. Ethan's eyes followed her every motion, the once familiar control he assumed now replaced by hesitation, uncertainty, and the realization that the balance of influence had irrevocably shifted. Guests exchanged discreet glances, their body language reflecting the subtle authority she projected, the quiet but undeniable force that demanded acknowledgment without a single overt gesture. Madeline's thoughts briefly returned to the years of meticulous planning, the hours spent cultivating competence and resilience, the deliberate choices that allowed her to step into this space fully prepared and utterly self-assured. The soft rustle of her gown and the gentle glint of crystal and silver accentuated the rhythm of her presence, weaving seamlessly into the ambient sounds of laughter, conversation, and the delicate clinking of glasses. She paused for a heartbeat, taking in the room, the energy, the awareness that her narrative had shifted completely, and in that pause, the subtle power of her arrival was felt universally across the space. Each measured gesture, each precise movement of hand or head, communicated a story of endurance, strategy, and confidence, a silent proclamation that she was no longer constrained by the past or by the expectations of those around her. The alignment of attention, the unspoken acknowledgments, and the quiet tension in the air all converged into a tableau of triumph realized not through words but through the presence, poise, and dignity she carried effortlessly. As Madeline Carter continued through the crowd, the interplay of light, sound, and gaze reinforced the narrative of her resilience and empowerment, leaving Ethan and all who watched suspended in anticipation, acutely aware that the next moments would reveal the culmination of her carefully cultivated authority and the full measure of her quiet yet commanding triumph. Madeline Carter paused at the center of the grand ballroom, the soft hum of conversation fading into a backdrop that seemed to amplify her presence, every eye drawn to her with subtle curiosity and unspoken anticipation. The golden light from the chandeliers reflected off the polished marble floors, catching the delicate folds of her emerald green gown and sending ripples of color that moved in harmony with her deliberate steps. The string quartet played a gentle crescendo, each note rising and falling in synchrony with the composed rhythm of her movements, reinforcing the elegance and authority she now embodied. Ethan Blackwell's expression shifted subtly, the confident composure he had relied upon wavering as he observed her fully realized presence, the realization settling that the woman before him was no longer defined by past vulnerabilities or by the expectations he once imposed. Madeline's mind traced the meticulous journey that had brought her here. Years of careful planning, countless moments of quiet strategy, the cultivation of skill, patience, and discernment that had transformed uncertainty into command, each experience now radiating through the calm assurance of her posture and gaze. She offered a measured nod to a passing colleague, her smile gentle yet imbued with authority, acknowledging acquaintance without dependence, signaling mastery over the social space she navigated with ease. The faint scent of fresh roses and the subtle fragrance she carried intertwined in the warm air, underscoring her poise while creating a sensory tapestry that accentuated her presence in ways both understated and compelling. Guests shifted in subtle acknowledgment, their attention drawn not just to her elegance, but to the confidence, experience, and quiet power she projected effortlessly. Each movement, each glance, each precise gesture carried the weight of a narrative reclaimed, signaling that past humiliations and constraints no longer held dominion over the space or over the perception of those within it. Ethan's steps faltered, his posture tightening, his attempts to maintain influence rendered increasingly ineffective as he absorbed the totality of her composure, the subtle command she now exercised over the room's attention. The gentle rustle of silk, the soft reflection of light on crystal, the warm glow of candlelight, and the delicate resonance of the music all combined to form a setting in which Madeline's presence communicated both strength and grace without a single word spoken. Every interaction she navigated, every nod or subtle acknowledgement, reinforced the story of a woman who had rebuilt herself with precision and purpose, commanding recognition not through assertion, but through the effortless authority of her own confidence. The collective attention of the room, the alignment of glances and subtle gestures, created an atmosphere in which the narrative of her regained dignity and influence was unmistakable, leaving Ethan and the observing guests suspended in anticipation, acutely aware that the full measure of her power, patience, and self-possession was about to unfold, revealing a presence that could not be ignored and a story that had been quietly, deliberately, and indelibly rewritten. The room seemed to quiet further as Madeline Carter paused beneath the central chandelier, the warm golden light cascading over her, illuminating the subtle strength in her posture and the calm confidence that radiated from her every gesture. The string quartet's music softened, each note echoing like a heartbeat in the expansive space, emphasizing the gravity of the moment and the meticulous presence she carried effortlessly. Guests turned subtly in their seats, eyes following her movement, sensing the quiet authority that needed no announcement, no dramatics, only the poised assertion of a woman fully in command of herself and the room around her. Ethan Blackwell's expression betrayed a flicker of uncertainty, a realization that the control he once assumed had quietly but completely shifted, that the woman before him embodied both refinement and influence, a presence he could neither challenge nor diminish. Madeline's gaze swept the room with a composed certainty, noting the alignment of attention, the slight tilts of heads, the unspoken acknowledgments that accompanied every step she took. The subtle rustle of silk and the glint of crystal surfaces reflected in soft light emphasized the deliberate elegance with which she moved, reinforcing the message of quiet power she carried as naturally as her own breath. Memories of her journey, years spent cultivating skill, patience, and resilience, coalesced in this moment, each experience contributing to the effortless authority she now projected, a narrative visible to all without a single word spoken. She smiled faintly at a passing acquaintance, a gesture that communicated warmth without dependence, engagement without compromise, signaling mastery of both social nuance and personal presence. The faint fragrance of roses and understated perfume mingled with the warm air, complementing her presence and accentuating the subtle, yet undeniable aura of influence she exuded. Ethan's movements grew increasingly hesitant, his attempts to maintain the composure of dominance faltering under the weight of her unshakable self-possession. The gentle ambience of conversation, the soft clinking of glassware, the low hum of music, all these sounds became a frame that highlighted her deliberate steps, each motion a testament to strategy, patience, and refined confidence. Guests instinctively adjusted their attention, aligning their focus. With her commanding presence, the room itself seeming to bend subtly to acknowledge the reclamation of space and narrative she had achieved. Every glance, every measured gesture reinforced the story of resilience and triumph, the quiet orchestration of her influence palpable to anyone observing. The air seemed to hold a collective pause, the anticipation tangible, as the interplay of light, reflection, and attentive eyes converged on her. Madeline Carter, standing with measured poise at the heart of the ballroom, exemplified the culmination of persistence, strategy, and unwavering dignity, leaving Ethan and all witnesses suspended in the realization that the full scope of her regained authority and quiet triumph was unfolding before them, a narrative rewritten entirely through presence, composure, and the unspoken power of a woman who had claimed her story on her own terms. Madeline Carter stood at the heart of the grand ballroom, the golden light from the crystal chandeliers cascading across the polished marble floors and catching the emerald shimmer of her gown, creating a soft halo of quiet authority around her. The string quartet's music swelled gently, each note harmonizing with the calm, measured rhythm of her movements. Underscoring the balance of elegance and control she now commanded effortlessly. Ethan Blackwell's gaze lingered on her, the composure he had relied upon for years faltering as he absorbed the full realization of her transformation, the subtle yet undeniable power she projected that no word or action could diminish. Guests instinctively turned toward her, their eyes following the deliberate grace of each step, the soft rustle of silk accentuating the presence she wielded without need for declaration. Every glance she cast, every nod or faint smile, communicated mastery, warmth, and the quiet confidence of someone who had reclaimed not only her space but the narrative of her life. The ambient sense of fresh roses and understated perfume intertwined with the warm air, enhancing the aura of poise and reinforcing the story of resilience and accomplishment that had brought her to this moment. Each detail in the room, the reflections on crystal, the glow of candlelight, the subtle movements of guests adjusting their attention, worked in tandem with her presence, creating a tableau that reflected both sophistication and authority. Ethan's steps faltered, his once commanding energy now diminished by the subtle, yet complete shift in dynamic, a realization that he could no longer dictate the story unfolding in the space. Madeline's mind traced the deliberate choices, careful strategies, and persistent efforts that had reconstructed her life, every moment of patience and determination now evident in the calm strength she exuded. The room seemed to contract around her, each movement commanding focus and drawing acknowledgment, a silent testament to the influence and dignity she now carried. Conversations continued, but their rhythm had changed, the awareness of her authority quietly permeating the atmosphere, reinforcing the narrative she had carefully crafted through years of meticulous self-possession. She exchanged polite nods with familiar acquaintances, each gesture measured and intentional, balancing engagement with sovereignty, her presence both welcoming and commanding. The soft shimmer of her gown, the gentle flow of silk over marble, the interplay of light and shadow across the polished surfaces, all these elements coalesced into a visual symphony of controlled influence and understated power. Every eye in the room registered her arrival, every whispered acknowledgment forming part of the invisible chorus affirming her reclaimed stature. Madeline Carter had arrived fully, not as a figure to be observed, but as one whose presence defined the space itself, her calm authority and composed dignity leaving Ethan and the guests suspended in anticipation of the moments yet to fully reveal the scope of her triumph. A story articulated through presence, poise, and the indelible assertion of self that could neither be challenged nor undone.